Okay, so one of the things we're working on in the DSC, so in our local chapter of DiEM, is this survey of the status of DiEM, but in general politics in Europe in particular. And we managed to talk with coordinators across Europe. We talk with people in Greece, in Spain, in France, in UK. We have contact in Italy, in Germany, and all over the continent. And there are some, of course, one of the main reasons why we do this is because we try to find some elements in common. And I think that there are some, sorry for showing this. Yes. I apologize.
You go blind now.
It gets worse. So the usual thing, Mexico is sending the worst people, we know that. So this is an Italian moron. Hopefully you don't know who this guy is. This is the de facto prime minister at the moment. He's actually Minister of Interior Minister. So it's just, he came out with this narrative of the invasion. There is an invasion of people coming from Africa. And so of course, that's scary. It's something that you have to be afraid of. This is Orban. It's like well, they are all kind of friends. They live there together. The far right in Europe is from Hungary, prime minister. Diversity is not a virtue. Essentially, the moment that people come from another country, we lose our identity, we lose our culture, we kind of mix, and this is our ruin. This is Le Pen, France, same thing. So there is immigration organized replacement of population. There is this concept of replacement, this concept of diluting the culture, the local culture, and something coming from the outside, which is a threat. Another guy, this comes from the UK. This is a famous board that was used for the campaign of Brexit. We all know how well that is going. With this concept of, again, an invasion, a caravan. We know the caravan in the US, that's the same thing. It has been used in UK. And all these words, these keywords, these ideas, they are all kind of like blend together and spread everywhere across all continents. We know that from Brazil that they are using the same rhetoric. We know in Israel, Netanyahu is using the same rhetoric against migrants and refugees. There's a lot in common, and many of these things are, we have a kind of supposedly an outlier, same idea. Most of these ideas are actually coming from the same sources. So Breitbart is actually used across Europe as well. Infowar is still a thing. How's it called? Bannon is touring Europe everywhere. So these are not just by chance common words. They are actually kind of organized up to a certain point. It's just, of course, there is a common element across all these countries. But there are some tropes that we can identify and that we have seen and we heard from people that we talked with in different countries. And there is this idea from the right in general that there is a perfect society. We have a society which is pure and nice and everything works perfectly, but there is a pollutant, a poison. This poison can be the Jews, can be black people, can be migrants, can be anything you want. It's something, the communist in some places, the socialist, it is something that it is considered external to the society that comes in and changes its nature. You take away the poison, you take away the migrants, and suddenly society is perfect for everyone. And everybody is happy and everything works perfectly. And this is the same thing that you have everywhere. It is way stronger in Europe at the moment than it is in the US. In the US you have people like Miller that is pushing for these kind of ideas. But you can still see that there are this kind of concept that, you know, there is something in the past, there was something great, make America great again. Something in the past was working perfectly. Then something happened and suddenly it's not working anymore. But if we go back the way it was, then suddenly things are going to get good again. This is actually, so we might think this racist concept dates back centuries. It's actually not that old. If we go back, even just Middle Age, there's no racism like we even could think about it now. Of course, there is nothing like that in classic time. The Romans didn't have any concept of racism. They just divided the world in whoever was citizen and whoever was not. It doesn't matter whether they're black or not, or white or whatever. There wasn't the concept. For the Middle Age, St. Augustine was North African. Nobody ever thought about that was a problem. There's many of the saints that we have in Italy, they're just blackface because they were from North Africa or from Anatolia or from other parts. There was no such a thing. This is a concept that was especially considered and made scientific to justify slavery. So it's quite recent. And the way it is conceived in terms of genetics, of course, it's just 100 years old, more or less. So there's nothing inside this idea. It's completely based on racism, white supremacists. It's completely false. It's very easy to go inside it and just prove that it is false. So for instance, the association between crime and immigration, that is used everywhere. This is just two charts from the United States. These are the immigration crossing the country, the southern border, and of course you can see the clear emergency here. So it's as low as it was in 1975. Violent crime rate in the United States, it doesn't follow the same path, there's no correlation. Same concept in Europe. This is from 1990 to 2017. This is the great emergency of the, not the migrants, the refugees coming from Syria. All the crimes are going down. They are going down most of the world from 1990s. There's a lot of theories of why. There's definitely not connected with anything about refugees or migrants because they've been increasing, decreasing. There is no correlation with crime. So I think that's the only thing that we can do with this particular idea. So there's a lot of racism anyway. I wouldn't engage with it, honestly. I come from a very specific approach in that sense. It's an approach that has been formed in the 20s and 30s in Italy against fascism. And the idea is that you have to deal with the electors, the voters, but you do not have to engage the conversation with the leaders. So if you engage in a conversation with the leaders who propose these kind of ideas, then you normalize them. You make it become part of the normal elements of discussion. So you do not engage with them, but you do try to talk with the people who are at the base, let's say that they are voters. Up to a certain point. I have my limits as well. So there's people who just decide it's completely waste of time. So just in the garbage. So which leads us to another concept, which is becoming very popular in Europe now, not so much in the US, strangely enough. The left party, so that even the Democratic Party here, so even the Liberal Party, there is a strong idea, probably because of the way the culture of this country is and the way it was formed by migrants, that this is something that pertains to the past. So this is Daniel de Leon, who was a migrant in the United States. He was a socialist. And this is the beginning of the 20th century. And what he was saying is that further consideration of the fact that working men are often imported by capitalists in order to keep down the native working man by means of cheap labor. So this is an idea that it is propagated now a lot. And so the fact that people come in and so they establish some form of competition with the local workers, and this decreases the wages. So this is a concept, by the way, this is the complete sentence, it's about backward races. And this is a socialist, 1907, if I remember well, Second International. So at least some things get better. This concept comes from a very simple idea that we all can relate to, and it's the idea of supply and demand. We've all learned that in a way or another, even if we've never attended any economic class. And we think it works. We don't need to have data in support of it. We usually give it for granted that it kind of works. So if there is a lot of supply, a lot of workers, the demand is the same, so the salaries are going to go down. We all think it works. So maybe it's true. Maybe I have nothing against migrants, but hey, there's a limited amount of work that we can have, and so jobs that we can have. So we should just find other solutions, and meanwhile close the borders. This is exactly what is used by part of the left at the moment in Europe, and this is breaking the front of the left, and it's giving open fields to the right.
This is what most people think is happening.
I wouldn't say most.
It's not just It's not just the left, it's on the right. They think that somebody's taking away their job. That's why they are against anything, anybody, even coming from another city. People from other neighborhoods coming into their neighborhood. They're taking away something from them.
There's a limited quantity.
So it doesn't stop by closing the borders. Once you close the borders, the same mentality keeps working even within states and localities. It's a never-ending, it's a very corrosive idea. That
it's
somebody comes in and takes away your jobs.
There is this concept of a limited quantities of some things, which sometimes it's also limited quantities of rights, which is why there's a lot of people against giving the right of marriage to homosexuals, because they think that that's something taking away of your right to do something. But in this case, it's very powerful. It's convincing. It works. It is used by the right in the United States. I can tell you it is used by the left in Europe. This is an interesting difference, at least at the moment.
I think just like the words that are scarcity and abundance, and so it's a scarcity mindset as opposed to an abundance mindset, which is what you're saying. And if you take the word scarcity and just start amplifying it, people become afraid and start grabbing, as opposed to there's enough for everyone, which is your point.
If you
and
say,
I think it's worthy to bring into our discussion because that's uncomfortable to talk about. Because every one of us has a scarcity and an abundance mindset, and if we can even be super honest in our own discussions about what happens to us when we feel there's a scarcity, you know, it's like you can get in touch with like what happens to you, because it does change the way you think all of a sudden. If you think, my kid's not going to get a spot in school or something, the things you'll be fearing literally in 3 years.
Healthcare is under stress, especially if you have universal healthcare in Europe, and you say we cannot provide it to everyone, because then we don't have the money for it. Or if you have a minimum wage, not minimum wage, basic income. In some countries they have basic income, so they provide a certain amount of salary, stipend, even if you are unemployed. And then you say, but I cannot give that to people who are coming from the outside, because then they are just using our money. There's a lot of ramification, a lot of ways to go inside this particular trope, this particular idea. And that's why it is so convincing, because it works so well.
So we can go into the discussion later, but I think the point that Vincenzo wanted to make is that the right, of course, makes that argument, but even within the left in Europe, this argument is also being considered. It's unfortunate,
but it's true.
But of course,
I agree.
The right definitely has a very mainstream argument, but I think you want to point out that even the left, or part of the left, falls trap to make an argument.
The right adds the racist component to it, on top of this. So the reason why I think this one is particularly dangerous is because we can all easily get rid of racism saying, well, that's just garbage ideology. So it's just junk stuff. But this one, this is more difficult, because here you have to engage with the person who tells you, well, I don't have any problems with people coming from Tunisia to southern Italy to pick up oranges, and there's a lot of who do that, or from Mexican who go to southern California to work in the fields. But they are essentially taking down the wages because they are ready to work for lower wages. So it feels like, well, before, 30 years ago, we were working with decent wages. The only difference is that there's more people coming from outside. And the problem is that this is not true. So it doesn't work. It feels that it works like that because we think that that is correct. But that is not correct. That is an oversimplification of the way economics works and society works. And the easiest way to think about this is just to think about in terms of gender. So if I tell you at the moment, let's fire all the women who are working. What is going to happen is that there's the same amount of jobs around, but only men can work. So the salaries are going to go up. So apart from the fact that, of course, you're going to shoot me down if I say something like that, and you would be perfectly right, you immediately think, wait a moment, that doesn't work, that doesn't add up, that it's not the way we probably go. If we actually did an experiment like that, if we had a magic wand and we could do the experiment and then go back, what would happen is that we would decrease the amount of funding, the amount of money that was available in families or to single people. So they would reduce the amount of goods that would be used. So they would collapse the economy, actually, because there is less people who are able to buy stuff. And the entire concept of capitalism at the moment is about how many people can buy things. So if we are inside actually the demand and supply, the problem is that for this particular concept of workforce is that if you increase the supply, you're increasing also the demand at the same time. So the equilibrium point is a completely different point. And we see that if we compare the real wages to the unemployment. So of course, if it's true that you inject immigrants in an economy and then the wages go down, then it would also be true that in the moments in which there is a lot of unemployment, there is a lot of offer, that there is not enough demand, so the wages should go down. And this is not always true. So if we see this is for the Eurozone, so the area that uses euro. And sometimes it kind of feels like it's going that way, but these are the last few years. And then you see that compensation, so the wages are going down, and unemployment is going down at the same time. So there is less competition, but the wages go down anyway. And this is not just a European thing, of course. This is from the United States. We all know that the unemployment here is very low, and it has been going down since 2008, essentially, 2010. And it has reached what is almost considered like a physiological minimum. So usually it's considered that below 3.5% it's impossible to get, because there's people changing jobs, there's people who are not going to work, there's a lot of factors to put in. So we should have a lot of power to negotiate better salaries, all of us. But the wages are going down anyway. So something is not adding up. And it's not because people are coming in, it's not because there is illegal, because we've seen before the chart, crossing on the border is going down as well. So everything is going down at the same time. And what is to be done, it's the interesting thing while I was reading about this particular issue is that this is the same issue that a lot of people were discussing exactly 100 years ago, actually something more than 100 years ago. And there was the quote by De Leon, so there was the socialists saying, well, we have to close the borders and we have to protect ourselves and we have to increase the salaries, we have to create a strong union. So these were actually people who were trying to see forward and say, we need a union, we need to create work, but we also to stop people from coming in because we cannot organize them. And that's actually the point. If you see the wages, they are actually perfectly correlated with the amount of people who are inside the union. So the only thing that actually matters is how much the workers are organized in terms of wages. It doesn't matter how many people are outside, and you can find very interesting charts if you should look for real wages and unemployment, and in which you see that there are moments in the United States in which there is high unemployment in the 60s and the 70s, and the wages still going up, and they are increasing way more than inflation. That's because the workers were organized. And it's the same in, you can think about several countries. I can tell you about Italy, because I know that country, of course, very well.